Imagine walking into a room where no one explicitly tells you that you don't belong.
Right.
Like there's no sign on the door barring your entry or anything like that.
No printed policy.
Exactly. There is no printed policy in the HR handbook that excludes you. And, no one is actively telling you to leave. But every casual joke made before the meeting officially starts.
Yeah.
Or every assumption about what everyone did over the weekend.
Yeah, the water cooler talk.
Right. And every single deafening silence when a conversational boundary gets crossed. Well, it all quietly but firmly screams that you are an outsider.
It really does.
So welcome to this session of the College Prof's Chalk Talk. Today, we are dismantling the invisible architecture of workplace culture.
And that invisible architecture is, well, it's fascinating because it is often far more powerful and honestly far more rigid than whatever core values an executive team decided to paint in giant letters on the lobby wall.
Right, the classic corporate values mural.
Yes, exactly. We are looking at the mechanics of inclusion, the anatomy of trust, and how our environments communicate with us in ways we rarely acknowledge out loud.
Yeah, and to do this, we have a really compelling stack of reference materials in front of us today. We are pulling from McKinsey's extensive data on the lived experiences of LGBTQ plus employees, Out and Equal's frameworks on the structural practice of allyship, and research from the Center for Leadership Studies on how broken trust affects a team.
It's a lot to dig through.
It is. And tying it all together, we have some phenomenal academic writing on what a room communicates ambiently. And looking at these texts, the goal isn't to debate the modern politics of diversity initiatives or weigh in on the culture wars.
Right. No, we're keeping it analytical.
Exactly. We're strictly looking at the mechanics these researchers and organizations are laying out, because the data presents a very clear picture of what is actually happening in the modern workforce, and our mission is simply to dissect how that reality functions day to day.
And I think the best place to start is with that academic text's concept of ambient communication.
Oh, yeah. Let's get into that.
Because the author puts forward a very precise psychological claim here. They argue that when someone feels the need to conceal a part of their identity at work, that hostile concealment isn't usually sustained by explicit prohibitions.
Like, it's not a memo from the boss.
Right. No one is writing down, "Don't be yourself." Instead, it is sustained by the background noise. It's sustained by comments made about no one in particular or jokes that rely on a really narrow view of what's normal.
Oh.
And, crucially, it's the simple absence of anyone challenging those assumptions out loud.
My read on this concept is that it functions almost exactly like background radiation.
But that's a great way to put it.
Because, you can't see it. There's no warning alarm going off when you log into a server or walk into the break room. But over time, if you are exposed to it, it dictates exactly how you behave.
It forces a reaction.
Yes, it forces you to put on a metaphorical hazmat suit. You have to hide who you are, guard your personal life, and constantly calculate what is safe to say. And the terrifying part about this radiation is that changing an official corporate policy does absolutely nothing to clean it up.
No, it doesn't. That analogy tracks perfectly with the mechanisms the text describes, because a policy change only addresses explicit rules.
Right.
If a manager sends out a memo saying, we are an inclusive workplace, that is a targeted, explicit statement.
Just words on a page.
Exactly. But if the ambient material, the everyday banter, the casual reliance on narrow stereotypes, the comments made to the room at large, if all of that remains unchanged, the climate hasn't shifted an inch.
Not at all.
The text makes a really sharp distinction between a statement directed at a specific person and a statement made about no one in particular, but broadcast to the group.
And it seems like that second category, like the ambient broadcast, actually does the heavier lifting in making an environment toxic.
Definitely.
Because think about it. If someone insults me directly to my fears, there is a clear mechanism for response. I can defend myself, or I can take it to HR. It's an overt conflict.
You have a target to address.
Right. But if someone makes a casual joke to the room that relies on a stereotype and everyone chuckles and no one challenges it, well, the room has just communicated its values without meaning to.
Yeah, the silence becomes the endorsement.
Oh, that's powerful.
Because group dynamics rely heavily on observing what the collective tolerates. When an exclusionary comment just hangs in the air unchallenged, the human brain processes that absence of friction as a confirmation of the group's baseline.
Wow, so it's like a subconscious boundary marker.
Yes, it tells the marginalized person, this is the true boundary of this group, do not cross it.
Let's ground this in the McKinsey data because the numbers here really paint a stark picture of what that hypervigilance looks like in practice.
The numbers are pretty jarring.
They really are. Despite the massive outreach efforts we see during Pride Month, the parades and the corporate logos changing colors.
The superficial stuff, yeah.
Exactly. The ambient reality is stark. More than half of gay, lesbian, and non-binary employees report experiencing being an only.
And just to clarify, that means they are the sole person of their sexual orientation or gender identity in a given setting.
Right. They look around the meeting room and realize, I'm the only one.
And being an only completely alters how you process ambient communication.
How so?
Well, when you are the numerical minority in a space, the background radiation feels exponentially hotter. Your brain is dedicating a significant amount of cognitive processing power simply to threat assessment.
You're just scanning the room.
Always. You are constantly reading the room to figure out what the majority considers normal, which leaves less cognitive energy for your actual work.
Which explains this next piece of data perfectly. 45% of surveyed workers who identify as LGBTQ+ feel they have to be careful about discussing their personal lives in the workplace.
Almost half.
Almost half of an entire demographic is constantly managing their own concealment. They're listening to the room, assessing the silence, and deciding it is simply not safe to take the hazmat suit off.
And that self-censorship is often a direct response to microaggressions.
Right, the little things that add up.
Yeah. The research found that nearly 1/3 of these employees experience frequent microaggressions. We're talking about things like being interrupted, having their expertise questioned out of nowhere, or just being talked over.
And the intersectional data here is crucial, isn't it?
It is. Transgender employees and LGBTQ+ women are significantly more likely to report experiencing these behaviors than gay men.
Wow.
And these microaggressions, they function as constant, low-level tests of the ambient culture. Every time an employee is talked over and the room just lets it happen, the ambient message of exclusion is reinforced.
Okay, I want to pause here and look at the physical room itself, or, well, rather the modern lack of one.
The remote work factor.
Yeah. When the massive shift to remote work happened, there was this widespread assumption that hybrid environments would be the great equalizer.
I remember that narrative.
Right. The logic was, if you remove the physical break room, if you give people control over their own home office, you somehow remove the toxic dynamics. It seemed like a geographical cure for a cultural problem.
But the McKinsey data reveals a massive paradox there.
The hybrid work paradox.
Exactly. It turns out that geographical distance does not neutralize a toxic ambient culture. In many ways, it crystallizes it.
Wait, really? How does it make it worse?
Well, LGBTQ+ men, women, and non-binary workers report feeling far more left out of important developments and just generally less connected to others at work in hybrid models compared to their straight peers.
That's fascinating.
Furthermore, over 1/3 of transgender employees noted that it is actually tougher to get noticed for their work in a hybrid environment.
We really have to look at the actual mechanics of virtual meetings to understand why this happens.
Yeah, let's break it down.
If ambient communication relies on who speaks, who gets talked over, and the silence that follows, a Zoom call is essentially a laboratory designed to amplify those exact dynamics.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about the mute button. In a physical room, a slight gasp, a shift in body language, or even a quick whispered disagreement to the person next to you can signal that a joke landed poorly.
You have all those non-verbal cues.
Right. But in a virtual meeting, silence is the default setting. Everyone is muted. You literally have to click a button and interrupt the audio feed to challenge an assumption. The user interface of remote work turns casual pushback into a formal disruption.
That is a brilliant observation about the digital architecture. The threshold for intervening is just so much higher.
You really have to want to make a scene to unmute and say something.
Exactly. And furthermore, hybrid work strips away the organic, unscripted water cooler moment.
The hallway chats.
Yeah, for marginalized employees, those informal moments in a hallway or before a meeting starts are often where they build one-on-one alliances. It's where they gauge psychological safety in smaller doses.
Oh, I see.
When every interaction is scheduled and broadcast to a gallery of faces on a screen, the opportunity to navigate around the dominant ambient culture just disappears.
Yeah.
You are only left with the formal hierarchy.
And the psychological toll of this digital isolation is severe. The reference materials dive into mental health and burnout, highlighting a massive disparity.
The burnout numbers are intense.
Yeah, because while all employees across the board are experiencing high levels of burnout right now, The perceived safety in actually talking about it varies wildly.
What do the numbers say?
Only 14% of straight employees feel uncomfortable sharing mental health concerns with coworkers. But for LGBTQ+ employees, that jumps to 29%.
And it soars to 47% for transgender employees.
Almost half.
Almost half feel they cannot safely discuss mental health or burnout. If we trace this back to the cognitive load we discussed earlier, they're performing their jobs while simultaneously managing the stress of being an only. They're navigating a digital landscape that amplifies their isolation and doing it all under an ambient culture that signals vulnerability is unsafe.
So if this invisible heavy climate is the problem, the corporate world loves to present a highly visible solution, which it brands as allyship.
Ah, yes. The buzzword.
We see it everywhere, right?
Yeah.
The email signatures with the pronouns, the seasonal lanyards, the designated Slack channels.
But the frameworks from Out and Equal draw a really hard line between claiming the title of an ally and actually performing the structural work of allyship.
To make a big distinction there.
It's huge. They emphasize a necessary shift from intent to impact. Because having good intentions, like wanting people to feel welcome, is fundamentally a passive state. It exists entirely in your head.
It doesn't change the room.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Impact requires active, deliberate behavior that disrupts the ambient communication we've been dissecting.
Let's talk about what that impact actually looks like on the ground. Because Out and Equal defines allyship as a continuous year-round practice, not a badge you wear just for June.
No, it's an everyday thing.
And the most vital behavioral metric they outline is the willingness to speak up and address exclusion even when an LGBTQ+ person isn't in the room.
That is the definitive test right there.
Why is that the ultimate test?
Because if a stereotype is deployed in a room entirely full of the majority demographic and someone challenges it, they are proving that the culture itself rejects the premise.
They aren't just performing for an audience.
Right. They are demonstrating that their support isn't a performance put on for the benefit of an underrepresented colleague. It proves the background radiation is actually being neutralized.
It requires the majority to take on the social risk themselves.
Yes, exactly.
And Out and Equal points to structural advocacy as well. True impact means securing funding for employee resource groups, or ERGs. It means using your platform to share the stage and co-present, rather than just offering private praise behind closed doors.
You have to leverage your capital.
And from a leadership perspective, it means tying these inclusive behaviors directly to managerial performance reviews.
Making it a core competency rather than a volunteer extracurricular activity.
Right. If it's not in the review, it's not a real priority.
But the interpersonal dynamics of allyship are where people often stumble the hardest.
Oh, for sure. This is where it gets messy.
The academic text on communication provides a fascinating breakdown of what happens when a marginalized person finally drops the concealment and opens up to a colleague.
Okay.
It categorizes the responses into 3 distinct buckets. There's an assertion of support, a genuine change in behavior, and a third bucket, which is a demand for reassurance.
I am so glad we are digging into this third bucket because the psychology here is deeply insidious.
It really is.
The text describes a situation where the person disclosing is unexpectedly asked to manage the emotional discomfort of the person they just confided in.
Which is completely backward.
Completely. It
Yeah.
masquerades as hyper-empathy, but it's actually a demand. I was thinking about how to visualize this, and the best analogy is, imagine we were walking down the hall and I accidentally step on your foot with my entire weight.
Okay, ouch. I am wincing in pain.
Right. Now, the appropriate response, representing bucket 2, is a genuine change in behavior. I step back, I apologize sincerely, and I give you space to recover.
That would be the healthy response.
But instead, imagine I realize I stepped on your foot, and my self-image as a good person is so threatened by this mistake that I completely fall apart.
Oh, no.
I start dramatically apologizing, saying, "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I'm such a terrible, clumsy person. I feel so incredibly guilty. This is going to ruin my week. Please, please tell me you aren't mad at me. I'm usually so careful."
And suddenly, the dynamic of the interaction has violently inverted.
Exactly.
My foot is still throbbing. I am the one who was injured, but my priority is now forced to shift. I have to look at you, the person who caused the pain, and say, "No, it's fine. Don't worry. You're not a bad person."
You have to comfort me.
I have to soothe your narcissistic injury.
Yes. I have effectively transferred all the emotional labor back onto you. You took a risk by showing you were in pain, or in the workplace context, by pointing out a microaggression or opening up about an identity struggle.
Right.
And I have forced you to comfort me. because I cannot self-soothe my own discomfort with my mistake.
It is a brilliant analogy because it exposes how toxic that demand for reassurance truly is.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
The text urges us to rigorously distinguish between supportive-sounding sentences like, "I feel so terrible that you have to deal with this," and actual behavioral support.
Because sentences don't fix the ambient culture.
Right. Real allyship requires emotional regulation. It says, "I hear you," and then it adjusts its behavior moving forward. If an ally uses the wrong pronoun, they simply correct themselves and move on.
Just a quick correction. No drama.
Exactly. They do not throw a pity party that requires catering from the marginalized person.
Because when the majority relies on the underrepresented group to handle that emotional catering, we see a massive disparity in workload.
Oh, the numbers on this are staggering.
The McKinsey data quantifies this perfectly with what we can call the DEI labor gap. The numbers show that 54% of surveyed LGBTQ+ employees spend extra time outside their normal job duties, promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace.
Compared to only 41% of straight employees.
That is a huge difference.
That is a significant statistical gap representing thousands of hours of unpaid, invisible labor.
And it serves as the ultimate proof of a broken system.
Right. How so?
Well, if the employees who are already carrying the cognitive load of being an only, the ones wearing the hazmat suits to survive the background radiation, if they're also the ones expected to write the newsletters, lead the committees, and educate the majority on how not to step on their feet.
Then the ambient culture hasn't changed at all.
Exactly. The ambient culture has not fundamentally shifted. The burden of cleanup has just been outsourced to the victims of the spill.
That is such a sharp way to put it, which naturally leads us to the question of institutional failure.
Let's go there.
Because even with well-intentioned teams, and even in organizations that are genuinely striving for active allyship, environments fail. Leaders make terrible calls, boundaries are crossed, and trust shatters.
It happens all the time.
Our reference materials from the Center for Leadership Studies provide a forensic look at the anatomy of broken trust and the specific mechanics required for genuine repair.
You often hear that old cliche, trust takes months to build a bridge, and a single stick of dynamite to blow it up.
Right, the classic saying.
But reading through these frameworks, I really want to throw that metaphor out, it just feels too passive.
What's a better way to look at it?
The materials describe trust much more like a machine learning algorithm.
Okay, I like that.
It takes thousands of positive, consistent data points over a long period of time for the human brain's algorithm to categorize a leader or a work environment as safe.
You're training the model.
Yes. But one severe error, like a massive inconsistency, a public display of unfairness, or a blatant lie, and the system instantly flags that leader as spam. And getting yourself out of a team's psychological spam filter is incredibly difficult.
The algorithm analogy captures the ongoing computational nature of trust perfectly.
It makes it feel more systemic.
And the Center for Leadership Studies identifies the specific behaviors that trigger that spam filter. It's not always a dramatic explosion like the dynamite metaphor suggests.
Sometimes it's quiet.
Very quiet. Trust is often broken through simple inaction, like a leader failing to intervene when an ambient boundary is crossed.
Oh, going back to the unchallenged joke.
Exactly. It is also broken through inconsistency, where policies are applied unfairly. And crucially, it is broken through micromanagement.
I found the inclusion of micromanagement in this list so fascinating.
Really? Why?
Because if we view it through the lens of ambient communication, micromanagement isn't just an annoying workflow issue. It is a constant ambient signal from leadership that says, I fundamentally do not trust your competence.
Oh, that's so true. It breeds reciprocal distrust.
Right. If you don't trust me to do my job, why should I trust you to lead me?
And once that mutual distrust sets in, the costs to the organization are severe and immediate.
The bottom line really suffers.
The frameworks outline 4 compounding impacts here. First, a steep drop in productivity. Because employees who do not feel safe stop taking risks and stop going above and beyond, they retreat to self-preservation.
Just doing the bare minimum to survive the day.
Second, high turnover, which leads to massive recruitment costs. Third, the fracturing of internal relationships where teams become siloed and resentful.
They stop communicating.
And finally, external reputational damage. The internal rot eventually breaches the walls, and clients or future talent take notice.
So, okay, let's say the algorithmic trust score is at 0, the team is hemorrhaging talent, and the leader realizes they need to fix it.
Time for repair.
The Center for Leadership Studies outlines a highly specific four-step process for rebuilding. And looking at the psychology behind these steps, none of them are about quick fixes.
No, it's a grind.
Step 1 is acknowledge and own the actions. And the key here is using the active voice.
No passive PR speak.
Exactly. It is not a PR statement saying mistakes were made. It is looking a team in the eye and saying, I made this specific decision, it was the wrong one, and I own the fallout.
The psychology behind step 1 is entirely about resolving the team's cognitive dissonance.
How does that work?
Well, when a leader fails, but refuses to name the failure, the team is forced to question their own reality. They're thinking, am I crazy, or did that just happen?
Oh, right. It's almost like gaslighting.
Exactly. By acknowledging the specific action, the leader validates the team's perception, which is the first necessary data point in teaching the algorithm that the leader is actually connected to reality.
That makes so much sense.
Step 2 is apologize sincerely. But a genuine apology in this framework requires explaining the why behind the mistake without making it an excuse.
Right, because explaining the why gives the team a predictable mechanism to look at.
Right, it demystifies the failure.
If a leader just says, I'm sorry, the team has no idea if it will happen again. But if the leader says, I made this poor decision because I prioritized speed over thoroughness and I let my anxiety dictate the timeline, the team now understands the root cause.
Yes.
It removes the unpredictable terror of a random failure. They know what broke.
Exactly. It maps the failure, which brings us to step 3, outlining the correction.
Effects.
This is where the leader establishes the new boundaries and details the specific, measurable actions they will take to prevent a recurrence.
But there's a trap here, right?
A huge trap. The critical warning in the literature here is about the danger of overpromising.
Because they want to win everyone back so badly.
Exactly. In their desperation to win the team back, a leader might promise sweeping changes they can't possibly sustain. And if they break a small commitment during this delicate rebuilding phase, the algorithm flags them as spam again, and the clock resets to 0.
The trust is even lower than before.
Much lower. Which makes step 4 the most counterintuitive, yet perhaps the most powerful piece of the puzzle. Ask for help.
That's a tough one for a lot of leaders.
It is. The leader must ask the team for their input on how to implement the corrections and navigate forward.
So it's about shifting the power dynamic through vulnerability.
Yes.
Because in traditional leadership models, asking for help is seen as weakness, right? The leader is supposed to have all the answers.
Right, the hero-leader myth.
But in the mechanics of trust repair, asking for help sends a profound psychological signal. It tells the team, even though you have reason to distrust me, I still trust you.
It extends the olive branch of trust first.
Exactly. It kicks the positive feedback loop back into motion.
It really does.
Okay, I want to challenge this sequence a bit, or at least look at how it plays out in a group setting.
Okay, hit me.
Let's imagine an employee severely damages the trust of their peers, like a really bad mistake. They go to the team leader and they execute these 4 steps perfectly. They own it, they explain the why, they outline their behavioral correction, and they ask the leader for help.
Textbook perfect.
The leader is satisfied, accepts the apology, and says, I forgive you, we are good. The employee returns to their desk. Is the trust fixed?
If we cross-reference this scenario with our academic text on communication, the answer is a definitive no.
Not at all.
And this is a profoundly important distinction that organizations get wrong every single day. Forgiveness from an individual leader does not equate to collective acceptance from the group.
Because that private meeting in the manager's office did absolutely nothing to address the ambient tension of the peers who were directly affected by the fallout.
Nothing at all.
The leader is essentially confusing their own administrative closure with the team's psychological healing.
Precisely. Individual forgiveness and collective acceptance operate on entirely different emotional frequencies.
They aren't the same thing.
If a leader assumes their personal forgiveness automatically patches the hole in the team fabric, they are fundamentally misreading how group trust functions.
They're trying to fast-track it.
The text asks us to look very closely at what that returning person has to do when they finally face the actual group of peers they harmed. And it makes a crucial distinction about what they must not ask for.
The demand for immediate absolution.
Yes.
The text argues that the returning person must not walk into the room and ask the group to forgive them right then and there so they can all move on.
It's selfish.
And tracing the psychology back, it connects directly to the demand for reassurance we talked about with allyship and the stepping on the foot analogy.
It is the exact same mechanism.
It's all connected.
Asking for immediate absolution forces a group to perform a feeling it doesn't actually possess yet. If you walk into a room you've damaged and say, "Please forgive me," you are prioritizing your own comfort.
You want to feel better.
You are demanding that the group drop their very valid algorithmic distrust simply to soothe your anxiety about being the bad guy.
You are asking them to ignore the background radiation because your hazmat suit is uncomfortable.
That is perfectly said.
So what is the alternative? How do they actually handle it?
The text says, the returning person must only request the opportunity to earn trust back over time.
Just the opportunity.
They need to say, I am not asking you to trust me today. I am acknowledging the damage I caused, and I am asking for the chance to show you, through consistent future behavior, that I can be trusted again.
That phrasing fundamentally respects the group.
It gives them agency.
It acknowledges that collective trust operates on its own timeline, completely independent of the offender's timeline. It takes the pressure off the team to fake a psychological safety they don't have.
And it places the burden of proof exactly where it belongs.
On the ongoing, observable actions of the person who broke the trust. It all comes back to behavior. Not the words in the handbook, not the visible badges or lanyards, and not the private pardons from leadership. It is the actual ongoing behavior in the room.
The daily practice.
Pulling these threads together, the reference materials have painted a deeply interconnected picture today. We've seen that true workplace inclusion requires actively disrupting the ambient, unchallenged jokes and dismantling the invisible climate that forces people into concealment.
We've learned that active allyship requires structural advocacy and a willingness to take on social risk without ever demanding emotional reassurance or transferring the labor of inclusion back onto marginalized groups.
And we've seen that repairing a culture when trust shatters requires immense humility. It requires understanding the algorithm of trust, acknowledging that a leader's private forgiveness doesn't fix a team's ambient tension.
Right.
And respecting that collective acceptance can only be rebuilt through consistent behavior over time.
It is entirely about attentiveness to what a pattern of communication actually does to a human being rather than what it appears to say on the surface.
It's the impact over the intent.
Exactly. And that brings us to a final thought I want to leave our listeners with today.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've spent a lot of time analyzing ambient communication, the proven concept that a room or Zoom call communicates a set of rigid values without anyone explicitly meaning to.
The background radiation.
So the question to mull over as you walk into work tomorrow is this. If an environment communicates without meaning to, what is the silence in your workplace right now implicitly endorsing?
Oh, wow. That is a heavy, necessary question.
Look around your next meeting. Observe who is interrupted, whose ideas are glossed over, and what casual assumptions are made before the agenda begins. Look not at what is explicitly forbidden by HR, but at what behaviors your organization's silence is currently funding, protecting, and allowing to thrive.
Because if no one is challenging it, the room is endorsing it.
It's the reality.
That is a powerful lens to take back to your own teams. Thank you to everyone for joining us for this session of the College Profs Chalk Talk. We highly encourage you to take these frameworks, the data, and these questions back to your own offices. Observe the ambient culture, disrupt the silence, and respect the timeline of trust. We will catch you next time.